Welcome to the first edition of EMTV World News this week. I'm Vanessa. Thanks for joining us. First to China, where rescuers scrambled to pull survivors from a cruise ship that capsized on Monday. 456 passengers were on board the ship, the Eastern Star, along China's Yangtze River when it overturned and sank in a storm. Survivors include the ship's captain and chief engineer, both of whom have since been taken into custody. Alana Lay with this report.
The cruise ship capsized during a violent storm, and family members of the passengers reacted hysterically, lashing out at not receiving official support or information from the government.
I want to register my complaint. You can't just mysteriously hold us all here and not give us an explanation. They need to publicize the events and they can't hide them. They haven't even tried to make us feel better, and we barely know how they plan to deal with this.
Rescue teams and soldiers worked yesterday, searching the ship's cabins and multiple levels. But by noon, the death toll had reached 396, with 14 survivors and 46 passengers still missing. The ship's captain and chief engineer have been detained as police further investigations. The cruise ship belonged to the Chongqing Eastern Shipping Company, whose general manager delivered an official apology on Friday.
I feel deep sorrow at this major incident. Firstly, I want to express my sincere apologies to the victims of this incident and their families.
Alana Lay, EMTV World News.
To India now, where hundreds took to the beach in Tamil Nadu in a desperate attempt to ease a devastating heatwave currently gripping India, particularly in the nation's south. Officials from 3 Indian states reported over 2,000 deaths in a week from heat stroke and dehydration, with temperatures rising past 46 degrees Celsius.
Although the death toll from this heat wave reached 2,300, an overdue monsoon recently offered a favorable respite from India's dry season, which is typically their hottest. Temperatures peaked as high as 48 degrees, which is reportedly India's highest since 1995. The monsoon is spreading through India's southern states, which are usually hit the worst. Environment experts are now calling on their government for a more official response to the yearly phenomenon.
If you look at the list of national calamities listed under the National Disaster Response Force, a heat wave is not one of the listed kind of calamities. Perhaps looking at the rising frequency of extreme heat wave-like conditions, if this gets listed as one of a national disaster or national calamity, there will be more concrete steps that would be highlighted as an action plan for the rest of the country, and then this would get operationalized and taken to many other states and not just a few pockets.
Alana Lay, EMTV World News.
Big news out of Bangladesh this week. 2 years after the Rana Plaza factory collapse, 42 people are now facing charges over the tragedy. The 8-story garment factory near Dhaka collapsed suddenly in April 2013, killing over 1,100 people. The factory's owner, Sohail Rana, and more than a dozen government officials are among those charged. The accused allegedly ignored safety warnings the day before the building collapsed, dooming hundreds of workers inside. The disaster drew worldwide attention to the poor working conditions in Bangladesh's textile industry, which employs close to 4 million people. You're watching EMTV World News this week. Stay with us for more international news coming up after the break. In Australian politics, Opposition leader Bill Shorten introduced a bill recognising same-sex marriage this week. The proposed bill reflects growing public support for the issue, which comes after Ireland became the first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage through a popular referendum last month.
Bill Shorten introduced the bill in the government-dominated lower house of Parliament despite opposition from Conservative Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who is not expected to allow it to come up for a vote.
This Parliament can change a law that no longer describes modern Australia and pass a law of which we can all be proud. Let us delay no more Let us embrace a definition of marriage that respects, values and includes every Australian. Yeah.
The proposal is the first by a leader of a major Australian political party. It effectively adds to the pressure on the government to allow a vote sooner rather than later. But Mr. Abbott, a socially conservative Catholic, says the government was focused on passing legislation on helping small businesses.
Same-sex marriage is a significant issue, but frankly, this government's absolute fundamental priority in the budget session of Parliament is to get the most urgent budget measures through, and by far the most urgent budget measure is the small business budget boost. So that's what I'm focused on.
Ireland backed same-sex marriage by a landslide in a referendum last month that marked a dramatic social shift in a traditionally Catholic country that only decriminalised homosexuality 2 decades ago. Supporters of same-sex marriage within the Australian government say they will seek backing for a bipartisan bill in the second half of the year, but only after the budget has been debated. Tokana Hasavi Jr., EMTV World News.
A Canadian court has ordered 3 tobacco companies to pay 15.5 billion Canadian dollars in the largest compensation payout in the country's history. The companies vowed to appeal the decision. The plaintiffs were Quebec smokers who said the tobacco giants failed to warn them of the health risks associated with smoking, while the companies argued that Canadians have had awareness of the health risks linked to smoking since the 1950s. Meanwhile, Beijing has imposed a ban on smoking in restaurants, offices and on public transport this week, a move which has been welcomed by anti-tobacco advocates. However, how the ban will be enforced remains to be seen.
Under the new rules, anyone in China's capital who violates the ban, which includes smoking near schools and hospitals, must pay 200 yuan. That's around 32 American dollars. Businesses can be fined up to 10,000 yuan, around 1,600 American dollars, for failing to stamp out smoking on their premises. Anyone who breaks the law 3 times will be named and shamed on a government website. The solution we have come up with is to eliminate smoking in public places, for instance, in restaurants. If anyone smokes, firstly, the people around this person can advise them not to. Restaurant staff have a duty to dissuade these people from smoking. If they don't listen to their advice, then they, the restaurant staff, will have to complain to authorities. The government will also no longer allow cigarettes to be sold to shops within 100 meters of primary schools and kindergartens, according to Beijing media. A World Health Organization representative in China, Bernard Swartzlander, said this enforcement is unprecedented.
For the first time, the lawmakers have thought very, very carefully how to reinforce the regulations. In previous laws, it was very unclear what to do if a person still smokes in a place where it's actually forbidden, and nobody could act on it.
Zhu Jingyuan, a smoker of 5 years, says she walked into a restaurant while smoking a cigarette and was told not to.
I think this time it's a really big crackdown, and it would definitely be very serious. At least that's what the waiter told me. Finish smoking outside, then you can come back in. That means they've started to be quite strict with the policy this time.
Chu Tieling, a mother from Henan province, hopes the ban will be successful, but also thinks it would be difficult for many smokers to get used to.
I think it will be a little difficult because, well, it's for the sake of preventing children from smoking. For some, they have smoked for many years, and it will be difficult to enforce this policy.
Smoking is a major health crisis in China, where more than 300 million smokers have made cigarettes a part of the social fabric, and millions more are exposed to secondhand smoke. More than half of Chinese smokers buy cigarettes at less than 5 yuan. That's around 80 US cents a packet. Tokana Hasavi Jr., EMTV World News.
You're watching EMTV World News this week. Coming up after the break, China and Korea sign a free trade agreement and rural education in Indonesia. Stay tuned. China and South Korea have formally signed a free trade agreement to slash existing trade barriers. Agreed in November and signed by the two nations this week, the deal aims to gradually remove tariffs on more than 90% of traded goods within 20 years.
The deal does not include rice and automobiles, areas where South Korea was worried about Chinese goods flooding its market. China is the world's largest exporter. It's South Korea's top trading partner, and two-way trade stood at around 235.3 billion in 2014, according to state data in Seoul. Chinese Commerce Minister Gao Hucheng was in Seoul to sign the agreement. The agreement has been signed, so trade and investments between both countries would be more free, convenient and standardized. It will deepen and advance economic cooperation between China and South Korea and safeguard important arrangements and guarantees. For South Korea, the agreement marks entry for a larger number of companies into the world's largest consumer market. The country expects to boost its gross domestic product by nearly 1 percentage point and create over 53,000 new jobs in the next 10 years after the implementation. Well, unlike other free trade agreements, this deal has a committee where we can discuss building another version of the Kaesong Industrial Complex. We think that this can contribute to the peace of the Korean Peninsula. This deal also involves finance, telecommunications and e-commerce industries, which is a first for China to include in a free trade agreement. China and South Korea established diplomatic relations in 1992 and bilateral trade grew to 235.4 billion in 2014 from 6.4 billion in 1992, South Korean data shows. Tokana Hasavi Jr., EMTV World News.
Turning to Indonesia now, under the country's Frontline Teachers Program, President Joko Widodo has deployed almost 800 teachers to the provinces of Papua, West Papua, Aceh and East Nusa Tenggara. Widodo said the quality of education across Indonesia is inconsistent and called on teachers to improve on and minimize education disparity in the country. He encouraged teachers to build good character among students and to remind rural children that they are Indonesian children too. To other news in the Pacific, 5 of 17 remaining territories under colonization are the Pacific countries of American Samoa, Guam, French Polynesia, New Caledonia, Tokelau and Pitcairn Island. Speaking at this year's Caribbean Regional Seminar on Decolonization in Nicaragua, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon urged United Nations to do more on eradicating colonization. The Secretary-General said the number of colonized territories has dropped from 80 to 17 since 1945. Although Ban Ki-moon said in 2011 that the UN would look into adding West Papua to its list of countries in need of decolonization, he later backtracked that statement. Ban Ki-moon pressed all seminar participants to take tangible steps to help eradicate colonialism before the end of 2020. A giant peace sign was formed by thousands of campaigners in the Philippines, marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Supporters in white shirts gathered at an open parking lot in Manila and joined hands to form the International Sign of Peace.
Organizers from Sending Good Vibes Foundation, a non-profit group campaigning for a positive attitude, said they wanted to promote the importance of maintaining peace in society.
We wanted to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. We would want to crusade for peace, to condemn war, because nobody would want another war to transpire again.
Sending Good Vibes President Fernando Gamboa said recent tensions with China's potent acquisition of islands in the South China Sea can be resolved through dialogue.
The problem is lack of communication and the ego of leaders. But if people will sit down and discuss, they can always resolve whatever problem there is.
Dressed in white, volunteers of World Peace alongside Sending Good Vibes Foundation members formed the giant peace sign to promote and encourage peace in the world. Tokana Hasavi Jr., EMTV World News.
Threats to U.S. airlines and North Korea's elite. Those stories and more after the break. There were some jitters in the U.S. over threats made against several airliners this week. It was a busy travel day after a long holiday weekend. The threats had the U.S. Air Force rumbling its fighter jets.
Air France Flight 22 from Paris was escorted in by U.S. fighter jets after authorities say an anonymous caller threatened the plane. Port Authority police radioed the pilot.
Do you have anyone ill or sick on the aircraft? No, nobody. And you haven't had anybody ill or sick during the flight, correct? Correct.
At New York's JFK Airport, passengers were held for 2 hours as FBI agents searched the plane and found nothing, issuing a statement saying the plane has been cleared. This passenger said for the longest time he had no idea there was a problem.
Just when we landed and when they stopped us, this is when we know that something is wrong.
There were other scares in the air, too.
United 63, North Tower, number 2.
This was another threatened flight coming into Newark from Spain. Authorities say they received threats against multiple flights, and security scrambled to deal with some planes coming from Europe and the Middle East, landing in numerous American cities, including New York, New Jersey, Buffalo, and Atlanta. Yet searches have so far turned up nothing. Still, it was enough to rattle nerves, with more than 37 million Americans traveling over this holiday weekend, a 10-year record according to AAA. In Washington, D.C., amid huge crowds, police grew worried over the weekend about a suspicious car parked near the Capitol. They said it smelled of gasoline and contained a propane tank and pressure cooker. But once the bomb squad destroyed the cooker, investigators determined it was never intended to do any harm.
Turning to North Korea now. While the majority of the country struggles with widespread hunger and poverty, a small pocket of Pyongyang's super elite live a life of luxury. Millions of dollars have been spent on new attractions in the capital, including a grand water park and lavish apartments, courtesy of Kim Jong-un's regime. Take a look.
The North Koreans took us here to show us their dolphins. But the audience really got our attention. This is the kind of unscripted emotion we rarely see in North Korea. Government propaganda shows over-the-top adulation for the supreme leader. But these smiles, these belly laughs are real, especially when our CNN photojournalist is pulled on stage. This dolphinarium, just one stop on our government-guided sightseeing tour, showing all the perks for Pyongyang's elite. Their lives drastically different from millions of North Koreans we're not allowed to see, living in poor rural areas, tending fields by hand. Experts say as many as half the population hungry. But when it wants to, North Korea and its young leader will spend millions on vanity projects, building extravagant amenities like this horse riding club. No expense spared in this brand new orphanage. Kids get regular visits from Kim Jong-un, a man they call father, but the orphanage is half empty. Most North Koreans in the capital live in drab housing blocks assigned by the government. We're shown only the newest, best neighborhoods, like these apartments for elite North Korean scientists. They even have their own vacation resort, the government prepared to spend lavishly to reward key personnel.
That's you, right there.
More special perks for those who train the elite. Senior professors at Pyongyang's most prestigious university get these free luxury apartments.
How does this compare to some of your friends and family members' homes?
This is much better.
But even the best homes need solar panels, backup power during regular outages. We also visit the Supreme Leader's lavish new water park, a gift for his people, featuring a life-size statue of his late father, Kim Jong-il, which must be revered like a religious artifact.
Everybody who enters the water park first pays their respects to the late leader, Kim Jong-il, who died in 2011.
Parkgoers have nothing but praise.
I want more foreigners to come here because I want them to be captivated by the great personality of our Supreme Leader Marshal, Kim Jong-un.
These luxuries you'll only find in the showpiece capital, home to the most trusted, loyal citizens, proudly displayed as symbols of national greatness, as millions of people struggling are kept hidden from the world.
Many residents of one Australian city have been shocked by what's been roaming the streets. A giant kangaroo has been spotted in lots of different places, from playgrounds to golf courses around Brisbane, Queensland.
He's arguably North Lake's most imposing resident.
He's very intimidating. He's a big boy.
More than 2 metres tall and weighing up to 95 kilograms. He's the last thing you'd expect to run into while walking in the suburbs. Linda Hellier came close, very close.
We turned the corner and then old mate jumped out. He's very big and I don't really want to take him on. He's got massive, massive muscles, big pecs and everything.
The giant roo's been spotted in playgrounds and on the golf course.
It's a big one. Yeah, it's a big roo, and I'm used to animals from out the west, and it is a big roo.
Smaller kangaroos are often seen in the area.
They leave their little calling cards for us.
But Big Buck stands out from the troop. He has a distinctive tear in his left ear.
We didn't intend to get that close because we obviously know kangaroos can be a little bit dangerous.
Most locals say they aren't afraid of the big roo and his mates. A bit of the bush in the burbs is what makes this area so unique. Council says 1/3 of North Lake's residents are born overseas. Now the real Australia is on their doorstep.
Stick with us for This Week in World Sports with Dion Kombeng, coming up after the break.
And welcome to World Sports. I'm Dion Kombeng. First to tennis, last year's French Open champion and world number 2 Maria Sharapova was eliminated by 13th-seeded Czech Lucie Safarova in the 4th round of the French Open earlier this week. Now, the Russian had reached the previous 3 finals at Roland Garros, winning in 2012 and 2014, but could not handle her opponent's strong forehand. Safarova, who had never progressed to the quarterfinals on the Paris clay in 10 previous attempts, hit 20 forehand winners to unsettle the former world number 1. Sharapova, who had only lost 1 of her previous 24 matches at Roland Garros, dropped her serve in the 3rd game but broke back in the 8th when her opponent double-faulted. Brazil's soccer legacy is evident in its people who embody the true spirit of soccer, and this Power Chair soccer team is an inspiring example. The Rio de Janeiro Power Soccer Club practice every Saturday, and their latest preparations were for the South American Championships, which ended in Uruguay today. Men, women and youth of different ages and abilities use specially designed motorized wheelchair to boost the soccer ball up and down the court. 2 of the best teams from Uruguay, Brazil and Argentina competed in a 2-day tournament which involves 8 players to a side and sticks for extra ball control. Papua New Guinea recently passed the National Disability Policy, paving the way for better access for people living with disabilities, but Brazil's Power Chair team sets the bar for inspiring and empowering all throughout communities. Now, the term age is nothing but a number doesn't fall short for 92-year-old Harriet Thompson, who recently took the title of the world's oldest woman to compete in a marathon. The Rock and Roll Marathon took place in San Diego, and Thompson, who only took up running at the age of 76, completed her 16th race. The former concert pianist and cancer survivor is helping raise money for cancer research and completed the 41-kilometer marathon in 7 hours and 24 minutes. Now that is a remarkable achievement. Congratulations to her. And that's all we have for you on World Sports tonight. Weather details after the break, and we take a look at the world's first round-the-world solar plane expedition. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Now we take a look at the weather from around the globe. And finally tonight, studies tell us that air travel causes more global warming than cars. Now a team of aviators have set out on a round-the-world journey to prove there are greener ways to fly. Pilots Andre Boschberg and Bertrand Piccard are attempting to cross the globe in an aeroplane powered only by the sun. The Solar Impulse 2 took off from Nanjing, China last Saturday and is currently en route to Hawaii. Poor weather forced the aircraft to make an unexpected landing in Japan this week, but the team hoped to resume the 35,000-kilometer Pacific crossing as soon as weather improves. Recapping our top stories, rescuers pull survivors from capsized ship on the Yangtze, FIFA President Sepp Blatter resigns, and Abbott government introduces new act to criminalize whistleblowers at offshore processing centers. And that's all the international news we have for you this week. See you at the same time next Sunday. I'm Vanessa Knight. Have a good evening.